Chapter 1. The Omega's Humiliation. Sera Ashwood had learned long ago that invisibility was a survival skill. At 23, she had perfected the art of blending into shadows, of making herself small enough that the other wolves in the Crescent Moon pack would forget she existed. It was easier that way. Safer. When they forgot about her, they couldn't hurt her. But tonight, invisibility would not save her. The Grand Marking Ceremony was held once every decade, a sacred tradition where unmated wolves from packs across the entire kingdom gathered in hopes of finding their fated mate. The ceremony took place in the capital city of Linares, in the massive stone amphitheater that had stood for over 1,000 years. Wolves came from everywhere, from the frozen northern territories to the sun-scorched southern deserts, all seeking that one person whose soul called to theirs. Sera hadn't wanted to come. She'd begged her alpha, Marcus Thornhill, to let her stay behind. She was an Omega, the lowest rank in the pack hierarchy, and everyone knew that Omegas rarely found mates at ceremonies like this. Most wolves sought partners who could strengthen their bloodline, increase their status, bring power to their union. Sera brought nothing but shame, the daughter of traitors, a wolf so weak she could barely shift, a burden the Crescent Moon pack had been forced to carry for 18 years. But Alpha Marcus had insisted, and when an Alpha gave an order, you obeyed. Every unmated wolf attends, he'd said, his lips curling into a smile that never reached his eyes. Even you, Sera. Who knows? Perhaps some desperate wolf will take pity on the traitor's daughter. The other pack members had laughed. They always laughed. Now, standing in the massive stone amphitheater with thousands of other wolves, Sera wished the ground would open up and swallow her whole. The ceremony was in full swing, the air electric with anticipation and the heady scent of so many shifters in one place. The unmated females stood in the center of the amphitheater floor, arranged in rows according to their pack, while the males circled them, searching for the telltale signs of a mate bond. The pull, the recognition, the undeniable certainty that this person was meant to be yours. Sera stood at the very back of the Crescent Moon pack's section, her head down, her long dark hair falling like a curtain around her face. She wore a simple gray dress, the only formal clothing she owned, while the other females wore gowns of silk and satin in jewel tones that caught the light of the thousands of torches illuminating the ceremony. "Look at her," someone whispered. "Still wearing rags. Did you hear? Alpha Marcus is going to make an announcement about her later." "Really? What kind of announcement?" "I don't know, but it can't be good. Not for her, anyway." Sera's hands trembled slightly, but she kept them clasped in front of her, her eyes fixed on the stone floor. Just a few more hours. Just endure a few more hours, and then she could return to her small room at the pack house, to her books and her solitude and the quiet life she'd built in the margins of the pack. The ceremony continued around her. Every few minutes, a gasp would ripple through the crowd as two wolves recognized each other as mates. She watched as couple after couple found each other, saw the joy and wonder in their eyes as they came together, drawn by forces older than memory. She'd stopped believing in fairy tales a long time ago. "Attention! Attention, please!" The voice boomed across the amphitheater, magically amplified so that every wolf present could hear it clearly. Sera looked up to see Alpha Marcus standing on the raised platform reserved for pack leaders, a microphone in his hand and that same cruel smile on his face. Her stomach dropped. "I apologize for the interruption," Marcus continued, his voice dripping with false courtesy. "But I have a special announcement to make regarding one of my pack members." No. As many of you know, the Crescent Moon pack has long been burdened with a complicated situation. 18 years ago, two of our wolves, James and Caroline Ashwood, were convicted of treason against the crown. They were plotting to assassinate our beloved Alpha King. A murmur ran through the crowd. Sera felt thousands of eyes turn toward her, felt the weight of their judgment like physical blows. The Ashwoods were executed for their crimes, as was proper and just. But they left behind a daughter. A weak, pitiful Omega who has been a drain on our pack's resources ever since. Sera's cheeks burned with humiliation. She wanted to run, to shift and disappear into the forest, but her legs wouldn't move. It was as if Marcus's words had pinned her in place. "Now, I am not a cruel man," Marcus said, and several people actually laughed at that. "I believe even the lowest wolf deserves a chance at happiness. So tonight, I am giving Sera Ashwood a special opportunity." He gestured toward her, and before she could react, two of the pack's warriors grabbed her arms and began dragging her toward the center of the amphitheater floor. "No," she whispered, struggling weakly against their grip. "Please no." They forced her to stand in the very center of the space, directly beneath the largest torch arrangement, so that she was lit up like an actress on a stage. Every wolf in the amphitheater could see her clearly now, her too thin frame, her shabby dress, the fear in her dark eyes. "Any wolf who wishes to claim Sera Ashwood as their mate may do so now," Marcus announced. "I'm sure there must be someone desperate enough to take on the traitor's daughter." "Anyone? Anyone at all?" The silence that followed was deafening. Sera stood frozen, her arms wrapped around herself, as thousands of wolves stared at her. Some looked at her with pity. Most looked at her with contempt or amusement. A few of the younger wolves were actually laughing, treating her humiliation as entertainment. "Come now," Marcus pressed, clearly enjoying himself. "She's not much to look at, I'll grant you, but surely someone wants her?" "No? No takers?" A male voice called out from somewhere in the crowd. "I'd rather mate with a rogue." Laughter erupted across the amphitheater. Sera felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. "Well, this is awkward," Marcus said, his voice full of mock sympathy. "It seems no one wants." He never finished his sentence. The air in the amphitheater suddenly changed. It was as if all the oxygen had been sucked out of the space at once, replaced with something heavy and electric and impossibly powerful. The laughter died instantly. Every wolf present froze, their attention snapping toward the northern entrance of the amphitheater. And then Sera felt it. A pulse so strong it nearly brought her to her knees. A recognition that resonated in every cell of her body, every fiber of her being. Her wolf. Her weak, barely there wolf that she could hardly ever connect with, suddenly surged to the surface with a strength she'd never experienced before. Mate. The word echoed through her mind, primal and absolute. Mate. 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 "No," she whispered, even as her body turned without her conscious permission toward the source of that overwhelming pull. Through the northern entrance walked a man, and Sera knew without being told that this was Kieran Blackthorn, the Alpha King. She'd never seen him in person before. Few wolves had. He was a legend more than a man. The most powerful alpha in 1,000 years, a king who had united the fractious wolf packs into a single kingdom through sheer force of will and dominance. He was said to be ruthless, merciless, a warrior without equal. He was also devastatingly beautiful. Kieran Blackthorn stood at least 6.5 feet tall, with broad shoulders and a warrior's build evident even beneath his formal black attire. His hair was dark as midnight, falling to his shoulders and his eyes. Even from this distance, Sera could see his eyes were a bright, fierce amber that seemed to glow in the torchlight. He moved with the lethal grace of a predator, each step deliberate and controlled. His power radiated from him in waves so intense that wolves automatically moved out of his path, bowing their heads in submission as he passed. But he wasn't looking at them. He was looking at Sera. Those amber eyes had locked onto her the moment he entered the amphitheater, and Sera felt the impact of his gaze like a physical touch. Her heart was racing, her breathing shallow, her entire body trembling with a confusing mixture of terror and something else, something she didn't have a name for. The Alpha King walked across the amphitheater floor with the absolute confidence of a man who had never been challenged, never been denied. The crowd parted for him like water before a ship's bow. Somewhere behind her, Sera heard Alpha Marcus make a sound, surprise, fear, but she couldn't turn to look. She couldn't look away from Kieran. He stopped directly in front of her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Up close, he was even more overwhelming, taller, broader, more intensely present than any person had a right to be. His scent washed over her, pine and smoke, and something wild and untamed, and her wolf whined with desperate want. "You," Kieran said, his voice a deep rumble that she felt in her bones. "What is your name?" Sera, she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sera Ashwood." Something flashed across his face, recognition, perhaps, though she couldn't imagine why the Alpha King would know her name. His eyes narrowed slightly, and then he tilted his head, exposing the strong column of his throat in a gesture that was somehow both vulnerable and completely confident. "Do you feel it?" he asked, his voice softer now, meant only for her. "The bond?" Sera nodded, not trusting herself to speak. How could she not feel it? It was like a rope of pure energy connecting them, thrumming with power and possibility. Kieran's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I have waited a very long time for you, Sera Ashwood." Before she could process what he meant, before she could even think to question or protest, Kieran reached for her. His hand was gentle as it cupped her face, tilting her head to expose her neck. Sera's breath caught. She knew what was coming, knew what it meant. The marking bite. The permanent, unbreakable bond between mates. In front of everyone. "Wait," she breathed, but her body wouldn't move. Couldn't move. She was caught in the pull of the mate bond, in the intensity of Kieran's presence, in the absolute certainty of his intention. "You are mine," Kieran said, his voice carrying across the silent amphitheater. "And I am yours. Let no wolf question this truth." And then he struck. His teeth sank into the curve of her neck where it met her shoulder, the marking spot, and Sera gasped as pleasure and pain exploded through her in equal measure. The bond snapped into place with an almost audible click, a connection so profound and fundamental that it rewrote something essential in her soul. When Kieran pulled back, Sera saw that his eyes had gone full wolf, bright amber and absolutely feral. His lips were stained with her blood, and when he spoke, his voice carried the harmonic resonance of both man and beast. "This woman is my mate. My queen." And if anyone, his gaze swept across the amphitheater, landing briefly on Alpha Marcus, has harmed her, insulted her, or caused her pain, they will answer to me. The silence was absolute. And then, as one, every wolf in the amphitheater, every alpha, every warrior, every dominant wolf from every pack, dropped to one knee and bowed their head in submission. All except Sera, who stood frozen in the center of it all, her hand pressed to her neck where the Alpha King's mark was already beginning to heal, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. She had come to this ceremony expecting humiliation. She had not expected to become a queen. Chapter 2: The Impossible Truth. Sera's legs finally gave out. She would have collapsed to the stone floor if Kieran hadn't caught her, his arms wrapping around her waist with a gentleness that seemed incongruous with his earlier display of dominance. He held her against his chest, and, even in her shocked state, Sera couldn't help but notice how perfectly she fit there, as if her body had been designed specifically to align with his. "Breathe," Kieran murmured, his lips close to her ear. "Just breathe, little wolf. I have you, little wolf." The endearment sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. Around them, the amphitheater had erupted into chaos. Wolves were talking in rushed whispers, the sound building into a roar. Sera could feel hundreds of eyes on her, could sense the shock and confusion and speculation rolling through the crowd in waves. Somewhere in the distance, she heard Alpha Marcus's voice raised in what sounded like protest, though she couldn't make out the words. "Your Majesty." Marcus was suddenly beside them, his face red, his scent sour with barely controlled rage. "There must be some mistake. This is Sera Ashwood, the daughter of traitors. She couldn't possibly be." Kieran's head turned with predatory slowness, his amber eyes fixing on Marcus, with an intensity that made the other alpha take an involuntary step backward. "Are you questioning the mate bond?" Kieran's voice was soft, deadly. "Are you suggesting that I don't recognize my own mate?" "No, of course not, Your Majesty. I would never. Marcus was practically tripping over his words now, his dominant posture crumbling in the face of Kieran's power. I only meant to inform you that this girl has a complicated history. Her parents were convicted of plotting your assassination. They were executed for treason against the crown. Sera felt Kieran's arms tighten around her slightly, but when he spoke, his voice remained calm. I am aware of who her parents were, Alpha Marcus. I was the one who sentenced them to death. The words hit Sera like a physical blow. She pushed weakly against Kieran's chest, needing distance, needing air, needing to process this impossible situation. He released her immediately, though he kept one hand on her arm, as if afraid she might bolt. You. Sera's voice came out hoarse. She cleared her throat and tried again. You killed my parents? Kieran's expression didn't change. I executed 2 wolves who were plotting to murder me and destabilize the kingdom. Yes. The casual way he said it, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, made something crack in Sera's chest. All around them, wolves were watching, listening to every word. She was acutely aware of being on display, of this moment being witnessed by thousands. I can't, she started, then stopped. What was she trying to say? That she couldn't be his mate? The bond was already formed, permanent and unbreakable. That she hated him? She'd been 5 years old when her parents died. She barely remembered them. This is insane. Perhaps, Kieran agreed. But it is also fate. Before Sera could respond, another voice cut through the tension. Well, this is certainly unexpected. A woman emerged from the crowd, and Sera recognized her immediately from the portraits that hung in every pack house across the kingdom. Luna Blackthorn, Kieran's younger sister and his most trusted advisor. She was beautiful in a sharp, dangerous way, with the same midnight hair and amber eyes as her brother, though where Kieran's features were hard and masculine, hers were elegant and refined. Luna looked Sera up and down with an assessing gaze that made her feel like a specimen under examination. The daughter of James and Caroline Ashwood. I have to admit, brother, when you said you were coming to the marking ceremony because you had a feeling, I didn't expect this. Neither did I, Kieran said dryly. Luna's lips curved into a smile that held more calculation than warmth. Well, we can't conduct the rest of this conversation in front of an audience. The pack leaders will want an explanation, the council will have opinions, and our new sister-in-law looks like she's about to faint. Sister-in-law. The word made Sera's head spin. Agreed, Kieran said. He turned to address the crowd, his voice once again carrying that magical amplification that allowed every wolf to hear him clearly. The ceremony will continue. My beta will oversee the proceedings. I am returning to the palace with my mate. My mate. He said it so easily, so certainly, as if he'd been saying it for years instead of mere minutes. Before Sera could protest, before she could do anything, Kieran swept her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing. She let out a small sound of surprise, her hands automatically clutching at his shoulders for balance. Put me down, she hissed, acutely aware that every eye in the amphitheater was watching them. I can walk. I know you can, Kieran replied, already striding toward the northern exit. But this is faster. And you're trembling. She was. Her whole body was shaking with adrenaline and shock and the overwhelming intensity of the mate bond that was singing through her veins, urging her to lean into him, to trust him, to accept what had happened. The cool night air hit her face as they exited the amphitheater. A sleek black car was waiting, the door already open. Kieran deposited her gently in the back seat and slid in beside her. Luna took the front passenger seat, and a man Sera didn't recognize, presumably the driver, pulled away from the amphitheater smoothly and quickly. For a long moment, no one spoke. Sera pressed herself against the car door, as far from Kieran as she could get in the enclosed space, her hand still pressed against the mark on her neck. It had stopped bleeding, but she could feel it there, could feel the bond it represented thrumming with awareness of Kieran's proximity. I know you have questions, Kieran said finally, his deep voice filling the silence. I will answer them. But first, I need to know, has anyone in the Crescent Moon pack hurt you? Physically, I mean. The question surprised her. Sera turned to look at him, finding his amber eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Define hurt," she said quietly. Kieran's jaw clenched. "That's answer enough." "They never beat me," Sera said quickly, not wanting to cause trouble. The last thing she needed was the Alpha King declaring war on her pack because of her. It was mostly exclusion. Being given the worst jobs, the smallest portions of food. Being blamed for things. Words. Words can leave deeper scars than claws, Luna observed from the front seat. "Who made you stand in the center of the ceremony?" Kieran asked. "Who turned your presence there into a spectacle?" Sera didn't want to answer. Alpha Marcus was cruel, yes, but he was still her alpha. Pack loyalty was ingrained into every wolf from birth. "Sera," Kieran's voice softened slightly. "I am your mate. Your loyalty is to me now, not to the pack that mistreated you. Tell me who humiliated you tonight." The bond pulled at her, urging her to obey, to trust. "Alpha Marcus," she admitted. He said he was giving me a chance to find a mate. But really, he just wanted to embarrass me in front of everyone. It wasn't the first time he's done something like that." Kieran's scent shifted, becoming darker, more threatening. When Sera looked at him, she saw that his eyes had gone wolf again, amber and feral. "Peace, brother," Luna said without turning around. "You can't execute every alpha who's ever been cruel to an omega. You'd run out of alphas." "I can execute the one who dared to harm my mate," Kieran replied, his voice holding that dual-toned quality that meant his wolf was very close to the surface. "You can," Luna agreed. "But perhaps wait until after you've had a conversation with said mate about her feelings on the matter? Just a thought." Kieran took a deep breath, visibly wrestling his wolf back under control. When he looked at Sera again, his eyes were human once more. "Do you wish him dead?" The question was asked so casually, as if he were asking her preference for dinner. "What?" "No." Sera stared at him in horror. "I don't want anyone dead. I just want—" "What?" Kieran prompted when she trailed off. "What do you want, Sera?" What did she want? To understand how her life had turned upside down in the span of 10 minutes? To process the fact that she was apparently mated to the most powerful wolf in the kingdom? To figure out how to reconcile the bond singing in her blood with the knowledge that this man had killed her parents? "I want to wake up," she whispered. "I want this to be a dream." Something flickered across Kieran's face, hurt, perhaps, though it was gone too quickly for her to be sure. "I understand this is overwhelming. Believe me, I wasn't expecting to find my mate tonight either. But you came to the ceremony," Sera pointed out. "Luna said you had a feeling." "I did." Kieran ran a hand through his dark hair, the gesture oddly human and vulnerable. "For the past week, my wolf has been restless, driving me toward the capital. I didn't understand why until I walked into that amphitheater and saw you standing there." "Standing there being humiliated," Sera said bitterly. "Standing there being magnificent," Kieran corrected, his voice fierce. "Do you know what I saw when I entered that amphitheater? I saw a woman holding her head high despite being surrounded by wolves who wished her harm. I saw strength and dignity in the face of cruelty. I saw my mate, and she was perfect." Sera's throat tightened. No one had ever called her perfect. No one had ever looked at her the way Kieran was looking at her now, as if she were something precious and rare. The car pulled through a set of massive iron gates, and Sera realized they had arrived at the royal palace. She'd never seen it before. Omega wolves didn't get invited to royal events, and even in her current state of shock, she couldn't help but stare. The palace was enormous, a sprawling complex of white stone buildings with towers that seemed to touch the sky. Gardens stretched out in every direction, lit by softly glowing lights that must have been magically maintained. "Welcome home," Luna said, finally turning to look at Sera. "I imagine it's a bit different from the Crescent Moon pack house." That was an understatement. The pack house had been a large, practical building designed to house over 100 wolves. This was a palace fit for a king. Fit for a queen. The thought made Sera's stomach flip. The car stopped in front of a grand entrance, and within seconds, the door was being opened by a servant in formal livery. Kieran exited first, then turned to offer Sera his hand. She hesitated for a moment before taking it, and the moment their skin touched, the mate bond flared bright and warm between them. Kieran's fingers tightened around hers. "I know you're frightened," he said softly. "I know you have every reason not to trust me. But I swear to you, Sera, I will never harm you. You are safe here." She wanted to believe him. The bond was urging her to believe him, to accept him, to let him protect her the way a mate was meant to. But she'd learned long ago that trust was dangerous, that opening yourself up to someone only gave them the power to hurt you. "Can I have my own room?" she asked, the question coming out smaller than she'd intended. Kieran's expression flickered with something, disappointment? Understanding, but he nodded. "Of course. You may have an entire wing of the palace if you wish. I won't force anything on you, Sera. The bond is enough for now." Luna led them through corridors that seemed to stretch on forever, past paintings and tapestries and sculptures that probably cost more than Sera would see in a lifetime. Servants bowed as they passed, their eyes widening when they saw Sera walking beside the Alpha King. The whispers would start soon, she knew. The daughter of traitors, mated to the king who executed them. What a scandal. They finally stopped in front of an ornate door. Luna pushed it open to reveal a bedroom that was larger than the entire floor she'd shared with 5 other Omega wolves back at the pack house. The bed alone was enormous, draped in silk in shades of deep blue and silver. French doors opened onto a balcony that overlooked the gardens. "This is the Queen's suite," Luna explained. "It hasn't been used in a very long time. Kieran's room is just through that door." She pointed to a door on the far wall, "but it remains locked unless you choose to open it from your side." Sera walked into the room slowly, trying to absorb the fact that this was apparently hers now. "This is too much," she whispered. "This is what you deserve," Kieran said from the doorway. He hadn't entered the room, she noticed. Respecting her space. "I'll have clothes brought for you. If you need anything at all, just pull this cord." He indicated a braided rope hanging beside the bed, "and someone will come immediately." "Thank you," Sera managed. Kieran looked like he wanted to say something else, but Luna touched his arm gently. "Come on, brother. Let her rest. The bond isn't going anywhere." After they left, Sera stood in the center of the enormous room, her arms wrapped around herself. Through the mark on her neck, she could feel Kieran's presence in the next room, could sense his restlessness, his desire to come to her. She crossed to the door that connected their rooms and, after a moment's hesitation, turned the lock. The bond protested immediately, a sharp ache in her chest. She could feel Kieran's response through it, acceptance, but also longing. Sera walked to the bed and sat down, her hand pressed to her neck, feeling the mark that had changed everything. Her parents had tried to kill him. He had executed them for it. And now they were mates, bound together by forces neither of them could control. What kind of twisted fate would create such a situation? But as Sera lay back on the impossibly soft bed, staring up at the ornate ceiling, she had to admit one thing. For the first time in 18 years, she felt safe. And that terrified her more than anything else. Chapter 3: The Weight of a Crown. Sera woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize, in a bed far too soft to be her own. For a blissful moment, she thought perhaps the previous night had been a dream, a strange, intense fever dream brought on by stress. Then she felt the mark on her neck pulse with warmth, and reality came crashing back. She was in the royal palace. She was mated to Alpha King Kieran Blackthorn. She was, apparently, going to be a queen. The thought made her want to bury herself under the expensive silk covers and never emerge. A soft knock at the door interrupted her spiral into panic. "Miss Ashwood," a female voice called. "May I come in?" Sera sat up, suddenly very aware that she was still wearing yesterday's shabby gray dress. Yes." The door opened to reveal a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. She carried what looked like several garment bags draped over her arm. "Good morning, miss. My name is Margaret. I'm the head of household staff here at the palace. His Majesty asked me to bring you some clothes and to see if you needed anything." His Majesty. Sera's mate. "I don't." Sera started, then stopped. She didn't what? Need clothes? That was obviously a lie. given that she was still wearing last night's dress. You didn't have to do this. Margaret's smile was gentle. With respect, miss, I think I did. You can't very well meet with the Royal Council in what you're wearing. I'm sorry, what? The Royal Council, Margaret repeated, laying the garment bags across a velvet chaise near the window. They've requested an audience with you and His Majesty this morning. I believe they want to discuss the situation. Of course they did. The Alpha King had claimed a mate in front of thousands of witnesses. A mate who happened to be the daughter of wolves who had tried to assassinate him. Sera imagined the council had quite a few things to say about that. I don't know how to talk to a royal council, Sera admitted, her voice small. Margaret paused in her work of arranging the clothes. If you want my advice, miss, be yourself. His Majesty chose you. That's all the council needs to know. But Kieran hadn't chosen her, had he? The mate bond had chosen for both of them. Neither of them had any say in the matter. After Margaret helped her bathe, which was mortifying, but the bathroom had a tub the size of a small pool and Sera had no idea how any of the golden fixtures worked. Sera found herself standing in front of a full-length mirror, barely recognizing her own reflection. The dress Margaret had selected was beautiful, a deep forest green that brought out the gold flecks in her dark eyes. It was simple compared to the gowns Sera had seen other high-ranking she-wolves wear, but it was the finest thing she'd ever had on her body. Her dark hair had been swept up into an elegant knot, and someone had even provided delicate gold jewelry. She looked like someone who might belong in a palace. She looked like someone who might be a queen. Another knock, this one more forceful. Sera? Kieran's voice, muffled by the door. Are you awake? Her heart jumped at the sound of his voice, the mate bond surging with pleasure at his proximity. She was going to have to get used to that, she realized. The constant awareness of him, the pull to be near him. I'm awake, she called back. May I come in? Sera hesitated, then walked to the connecting door and unlocked it. The moment she did, she felt Kieran's presence more strongly, could smell his pine and smoke scent even through the thick wood. When she pulled the door open, she found him standing on the other side, his hand raised as if he'd been about to knock again. He'd changed from his formal ceremony clothes into dark pants and a crisp white shirt that did absolutely nothing to hide the powerful muscles of his chest and arms. His dark hair was slightly damp, as if he'd recently bathed. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. You look beautiful, Kieran said finally, his voice rough. Thank you, Sera managed, her face heating. You look fine too. Fine. She'd just called the Alpha King fine, like he was acceptable weather. But Kieran's lips curved into a smile that transformed his entire face, making him look younger, less severe. Fine. I'll take it. He offered her his arm, and after a brief hesitation, Sera took it. The moment they touched, the bond settled, satisfied. She could feel Kieran's satisfaction too, echoing through their connection. Are you nervous? He asked as they walked through the palace corridors. Terrified, Sera admitted. I don't know anything about politics or councils or any of this. Neither did I when I first became king, Kieran said. I was a warrior. I knew how to fight, how to lead soldiers into battle. I had no idea how to run a kingdom. Sera glanced up at him in surprise. It was hard to imagine this confident, powerful man ever being uncertain about anything. How old were you when you became king? 22. Kieran's expression grew distant. My father was killed in a territorial dispute with a rival pack. My older brother was supposed to inherit the crown, but he was killed in the same attack. So it fell to me, a second son who'd never expected to rule. I'm sorry, Sera said softly. About your father and brother. It was a long time ago. Kieran's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm. But thank you. The point is, I understand what it's like to be thrust into a role you never prepared for. You won't be alone in this, Sera. Whatever happens with the council, whatever happens going forward, we'll face it together. Together. The words sent a strange warmth through her chest. They arrived at a set of imposing double doors guarded by 2 warriors in formal armor. The guards bowed deeply to Kieran, then pulled the doors open. The council chamber was a large circular room with a domed ceiling painted with scenes from wolf mythology. A round table dominated the center of the space, and seated around it were 7 wolves, 4 men and 3 women, all clearly powerful alphas or betas based on the strength of their presence. They all rose as Kieran entered, bowing respectfully. But Sera didn't miss the way their eyes slid to her, assessing, calculating, judging. "Be seated," Kieran commanded, his voice taking on the formal tone of a king. He pulled out a chair for Sera, the one directly to his right, she noticed, before taking his own seat at the head of the table. "Your Majesty," an older man with iron-gray hair spoke first. "Thank you for meeting with us on such short notice. I am sure you understand that last night's development has raised certain concerns." Counselor Aldrich, Kieran acknowledged. "I'm aware that my claiming of a mate was unexpected. However, I fail to see why it requires a council meeting. The mate bond is sacred and not subject to political debate." "Of course not, Your Majesty," a woman with sharp features interjected. "But you must understand the optics of the situation. The girl's parents." "The woman," Kieran interrupted, his voice deadly quiet. "Her name is Sera, and she is your queen. You will address her with the respect her position demands, Counselor Thorne." The woman, Counselor Thorne, had the grace to look chastened. "Of course. My apologies. But you must understand, Your Majesty, that Queen Sera's parents attempted to assassinate you. They were part of a conspiracy to destabilize the kingdom. Having her as your mate raises questions about my judgment?" Kieran's eyes flashed amber. "About whether I'm capable of recognizing a threat? About the stability of the crown," another counselor, a younger man with calculating eyes, said smoothly. "There are still wolves in the kingdom who remember the Ashwood rebellion, who remember the chaos that followed. Having their daughter as queen could be seen as problematic." Sera felt her chest tighten. She'd known this would happen, that her parents' legacy would follow her even here. But hearing it laid out so boldly, being called problematic to her face, still hurt. "I was 5 years old," she heard herself say. Everyone at the table turned to look at her, and she felt Kieran's surprise through the bond. But she forced herself to continue. "When my parents were executed, I was 5. I didn't know about their plans. I didn't even fully understand what was happening. All I knew was that one day I had parents, and the next day I was an Omega being raised by a pack that hated me for crimes I didn't commit." "No one is accusing you of being complicit," Counselor Aldrich said, though his tone wasn't exactly warm. "But perception matters in politics. The packs will talk. Some may see this union as blessed by the moon goddess herself," a new voice interrupted. Everyone turned to see Luna Blackthorn entering the chamber. She wasn't technically a council member, but as the Alpha King's sister and advisor, she had the right to attend any council meeting she wished. Luna took a seat, her amber eyes sweeping across the assembled counselors with barely concealed amusement. "Surely none of you are suggesting that you know better than the goddess when it comes to mate bonds? That would be heresy, wouldn't it?" Several counselors shifted uncomfortably. "Of course not," Counselor Thorne said. "We're simply trying to ensure a smooth transition. Perhaps if Queen Sera were to make a public statement denouncing her parents' actions." "No." Kieran's voice cut through the room like a blade. "My mate will not be paraded before the kingdom to apologize for things she had no part in. She was a child, a victim of her parents' choices, not an accomplice." "But Your Majesty, this discussion is over." Kieran stood, and everyone else immediately rose as well. "Sera is my mate and your queen. Those who have a problem with this are welcome to bring a formal challenge. Otherwise, I expect the council's full support and cooperation." A challenge. Sera knew what that meant, a fight to the death for the right to rule. It was an ancient law, rarely invoked in modern times, but still technically valid. The counselors exchanged glances. Whatever concerns they had, none of them were willing to die over them. "Of course, Your Majesty," Counselor Aldrich said finally. "You have our support." "Excellent." Kieran's hand found Sera's, his fingers lacing through hers. "Then we're done here. I'm going to spend the rest of the morning showing my mate her new home." As they left the council chamber, Sera could feel the weight of the counselor's stares on her back. Luna caught up to them in the hallway, falling into step on Sera's other side. "Well, that went better than expected," Luna said cheerfully. "Only 3 thinly veiled insults and 1 suggestion that you publicly humiliate yourself. Aldrich's usually good for at least 5 insults per meeting." "They hate me," Sera said quietly. "They don't know you," Kieran corrected. "Give them time. They'll come around." "And if they don't?" Kieran stopped walking, turning to face her fully. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing gently across her cheek. "Then they can deal with me. You are my mate, Sera. My queen. Anyone who disrespects you disrespects me, and I don't tolerate that." Looking up into his fierce amber eyes, Sera felt something shift in her chest. This man, this powerful, dangerous man, was willing to go to war for her, was willing to challenge his own council to defend her. It was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. "Come," Kieran said, offering his arm again. "Let me show you the gardens. I think you'll like them." He was right. The gardens were breathtaking, acres of carefully cultivated flowers and trees, with winding paths and hidden grottos, and a lake that sparkled in the morning sun. Kieran walked with her through it all, pointing out his favorite spots, telling her about the different plants and their uses. It was strange seeing this softer side of him. The fearsome Alpha King feeding ducks by the lake, smiling as he explained that the roses along the eastern wall bloomed year-round thanks to a bit of magic his mother had arranged before she died. "Tell me about her," Sera said. "Your mother." Kieran was quiet for a long moment. "She was kind," he said finally. "Strong, but kind. She believed that leadership was about service, not power. That a true ruler's strength was measured by how they treated the weakest members of their kingdom." "She sounds wonderful." "She was." Kieran's expression grew distant. "She would have liked you, I think. She always said I needed someone who would challenge me, who wouldn't be intimidated by my position." "I'm definitely intimidated by your position," Sera admitted. "But you stand up to me anyway," Kieran pointed out. "In the council chamber, you spoke your truth even though you were frightened. That takes courage." They sat down on a bench overlooking the lake, and for a while, neither of them spoke. Sera was intensely aware of Kieran beside her, of the mate bond humming contentedly between them now that they were close. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Anything. Do you regret this? The bond, I mean. If you could choose any wolf in the kingdom to be your mate, would you choose me?" Kieran turned to look at her, his amber eyes intense. "I don't believe in regrets, Sera. What I believe is that the goddess knew what she was doing when she created the mate bond. You and I were meant to find each other. But my parents were your parents, not you." Kieran's hand found hers, his larger fingers enveloping her smaller ones. "I executed James and Caroline Ashwood because they were a threat to the kingdom, because they were willing to plunge thousands of wolves into chaos and war to achieve their goals. But you? You're not responsible for their choices. The council doesn't see it that way. The council will adapt." Kieran's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, the gesture soothing. "They always do. What matters is that you and I understand the truth, that we are mates, that we belong together, and that nothing that happened in the past changes that." Sera wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this could work, that she could somehow become the queen this kingdom needed. But deep down, she couldn't shake the fear that she was a ticking time bomb, that eventually, her past would catch up to her, and when it did, it would destroy everything. Chapter 4. Shadows of the Past. Over the next week, Sera began to settle into a routine at the palace, though settle was perhaps too generous a word. She felt more like she was treading water, barely keeping her head above the surface of a life that still didn't feel real. Every morning, Margaret would help her dress in the beautiful clothes that had appeared in her wardrobe. Apparently, Kieran had commissioned an entire collection from the kingdom's finest designers. Every afternoon, Luna would sweep in to give her lessons on everything from palace protocol to pack politics to the complex web of alliances and rivalries that governed the kingdom. And every evening, Kieran would knock on the connecting door between their rooms and ask if she'd like to have dinner with him. She always said yes. It was strange, getting to know her mate in these carefully controlled circumstances. They would sit in Kieran's private dining room, a space far more intimate than the formal banquet halls, and talk about everything and nothing. He asked about her life in the Crescent Moon Pack, and though it pained her to revisit those memories, she found herself telling him things she'd never told anyone. About the years of isolation, the constant reminder that she was a burden, the way Alpha Marcus would use her as an example whenever he wanted to make a point about loyalty or the consequences of betrayal. Kieran listened to it all, his expression growing darker with each story. More than once, Sera had to talk him down from going to the Crescent Moon territory to have a conversation with Alpha Marcus. "He's not worth it," she would say. "I survived. I'm here now. That's what matters." But she could see it bothered him, the knowledge that his mate had been mistreated for years while he'd been unaware of her existence. In return, Kieran told her about his own past, about growing up as a second son, never expecting to rule, about the attack that had killed his father and brother and thrust him onto a throne he'd never wanted, about the early years of his reign when he'd had to fight constantly to maintain control, to prove he was strong enough to lead. "I became the king everyone expected me to be," he admitted one evening, swirling wine in his glass. "Hard, ruthless, uncompromising. It was the only way to survive in those early days. But somewhere along the way, I forgot how to be anything else." "I don't think that's true," Sera said softly. Sera could feel Kieran's emotions now through their connection, his contentment when she was near, his frustration when council meetings ran long, his carefully banked desire whenever they touched. That last one both thrilled and terrified her. She knew what was expected of a mated pair. Knew that eventually, they would need to complete the bond fully, to join not just emotionally, but physically. The thought made heat pool low in her belly even as anxiety twisted in her chest. Kieran never pushed. Never did more than hold her hand or brush a kiss against her forehead when he said goodnight. But she could feel the restraint it took, could sense his wolf prowling just beneath the surface, demanding he claim what was his. She appreciated his patience. But she also felt guilty for needing it. On the 8th day after the marking ceremony, everything changed. Sera was in the library, a massive room filled floor to ceiling with more books than she'd ever seen in her life. When Luna found her. "There you are," Luna said, sounding uncharacteristically tense. "We need to talk." Sera looked up from the history of the kingdom she'd been reading. "Is something wrong?" "That depends on your perspective." Luna pulled up a chair, her amber eyes serious. "There's going to be a formal reception in 3 days. The first time you'll be presented to the assembled pack leaders as queen. It's going to be intense." "Intense how?" "Well, there will be about 200 high-ranking wolves from every pack in the kingdom, all of whom will want to assess the new queen. Some will be curious. Some will be skeptical. And some," Luna paused, "will be actively hostile. Because of my parents. Because of your parents, because you're an Omega, because they had their own candidates in mind for Kieran. Take your pick." Luna leaned forward. "I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you because you need to be prepared. There will be wolves who try to undermine you, who will look for any weakness they can exploit." "I'm full of weaknesses," Sera said quietly. "No, you're not." Luna's voice was fierce. "You survived 18 years in a pack that wanted to break you, and you came out of it with your kindness and dignity intact. That's not weakness, Sera. That's steel." Before Sera could respond, a commotion outside the library made them both turn. Raised voices, and then the library doors burst open. Kieran strode in, his expression thunderous, followed by a man Sera didn't recognize. The stranger was tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of arrogant bearing that suggested he was used to getting his way. "You can't just barge into my palace making demands, Alpha Garrett," Kieran was saying, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "I'm not making demands," the man, Alpha Garrett, replied. "I'm exercising my right as a pack leader to formally question the legitimacy of your mate bond." Sera felt as if she'd been doused with ice water. "What?" Alpha Garrett's eyes swung to her, and she saw nothing but cold calculation in them. "I am Alpha Garrett of the Silver Ridge Pack, and I am invoking the ancient right of challenge. You can't be serious, Luna said, standing up. The mate bond is sacred. Unchallengeable. Under normal circumstances, yes, Garrett agreed. But these are not normal circumstances. The queen is the daughter of convicted traitors. Her bloodline is tainted. I am challenging whether such a wolf is fit to sit on the throne, mate bond or no. Her bloodline is none of your concern, Kieran growled, moving to stand between Garrett and Sera. She is my mate. My queen. That is the end of it. Is it? Garrett's smile was cold. Because I have documents here that suggest otherwise. Documents that show the Ashwood rebellion was far larger than anyone realized. That there were dozens of co-conspirators, many of whom were never caught. He pulled out a folder and tossed it onto the table. Luna reached for it immediately, her expression darkening as she scanned the contents. These are intelligence reports, she said. From 18 years ago. Where did you get these? That's not important, Garrett said. What's important is what they reveal. The Ashwood rebellion wasn't just James and Caroline. It was a network. And there's evidence that suggests young Sera here might have been more involved than anyone realized. I was 5 years old. Sera protested, her voice shaking. Or so you claim, Garrett said. But these documents suggest that you were older than 5. That your age was falsified to protect you from execution. That's insane, Kieran said, his voice deadly quiet. You're grasping at straws, trying to create a scandal where none exists. Am I? Garrett turned to Sera. Tell me, Miss Ashwood, or should I say, Your Majesty, do you remember your parents? Do you remember anything from before they were executed? Sera's mind raced. Did she remember? She had fragments, a woman's voice singing, a man's laugh, the smell of fresh bread. But nothing concrete. Nothing that could prove or disprove anything. Fragmented memories, she admitted. Nothing clear. How convenient, Garrett sneered. No memory of the rebellion. No memory of your parents' plans. And yet you expect us to believe you are innocent. She was a child, Kieran repeated, and this time his voice carried the harmonic resonance of his wolf. This conversation is over, Garrett. Leave my palace. Now. I will, Garrett said. But this isn't over, Your Majesty. I'm bringing this challenge to the full council. The kingdom has a right to know if their queen is a secret traitor. After Garrett left, escorted out by palace guards, Kieran turned to Sera. She saw the concern in his eyes, the barely controlled rage that he was keeping in check for her sake. He's lying, Kieran said. Whatever those documents say, they're either fake or they've been misinterpreted. How do you know? Sera asked quietly. Because I was the one who investigated the Ashwood rebellion. I personally reviewed every piece of evidence. There was never any suggestion that you were involved. Luna was still reading through the documents, her expression troubled. These look authentic, Kieran. The paper is aged correctly, the seals look legitimate. Then someone very powerful wants to make them look authentic, Kieran said. This is a setup. Someone is trying to use Sera to get to me. Or someone is trying to stop you from having an heir, Luna said quietly. Think about it. If Sera is delegitimized as queen, any children you have with her would have their legitimacy questioned too. It's the perfect way to destabilize the succession without directly challenging you. Kieran's jaw clenched. I'll find out who's behind this. And when I do. Wait, Sera interrupted. Both siblings turned to look at her. What if there's truth to it? What if I was older than 5? I don't remember clearly. What if my memories are wrong? It doesn't matter, Kieran said firmly. How can it not matter? Sera felt panic rising in her chest. If I was part of the rebellion, if I knew what my parents were planning. You were a child, Kieran repeated, moving to stand in front of her. His hands cupped her face gently, forcing her to look up at him. Even if you were 8 or 10 instead of 5, you would still have been a child. You would still have been innocent of whatever your parents did. The council won't see it that way. Then the council will have to deal with me. Kieran's thumb brushed across her cheek. I won't let them take you from me, Sera. I don't care what documents Garrett produces or what lies he spreads. You are my mate. My queen. And I will burn the kingdom to the ground before I let anyone harm you. The intensity in his voice, in his eyes, took Sera's breath away. This wasn't just the mate bond talking. This was a man who had made a choice, who had decided she was worth fighting for. We need to investigate, Luna said, always the practical one. Find out where Garrett got these documents and whether they're real. If they are, we need to know who else has copies. Agreed, Kieran said, though his eyes never left Sera's face. But we also need to prepare for the reception. If Garrett is making his move now, it's because he wants to undermine Sera before she's formally presented as queen. So we move up the timeline, Luna said. Present her sooner, before Garrett can spread more lies. No. Sera's voice was stronger than she expected. No, we keep the timeline as planned. If we move it up, it looks like we're scared. Like we have something to hide. Kieran smiled, a fierce pride in his expression. My brave mate. Not brave, Sera corrected. Practical. If people are going to talk, let them talk. We'll face them head-on. Together, Kieran added, taking her hand. Together, Sera agreed, even as fear churned in her stomach. Because she was starting to realize something terrifying, she was falling for her mate. Falling for the man who had killed her parents, who represented everything she should fear and hate. And if the truth came out, if she really had been part of the rebellion, if she really was a threat to the kingdom, it would destroy them both. Chapter 5. The Queen's Resolve. The 3 days before the reception passed in a blur of preparations. Sera was fitted for a formal gown, trained in the proper way to greet pack leaders, and given crash courses in everyone she would need to know and impress. Luna was relentless, drilling her on names and faces and pack politics until Sera's head spun. But through it all, Kieran was there. Not hovering or controlling, but present. A steady, reassuring presence that she found herself leaning on more and more. The night before the reception, Sera couldn't sleep. She stood on her balcony, looking out over the moonlit gardens, her mind racing with all the things that could go wrong tomorrow. Can't sleep either? She turned to find Kieran standing in the doorway that connected their rooms. She'd left it unlocked tonight, though she wasn't entirely sure why. Too many thoughts, she admitted. Kieran came to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body, but not quite touching. Want to share them? I'm terrified, Sera said simply. Of tomorrow. Of what people will think. Of failing you. You could never fail me, Kieran said softly. Do you know what I see when I look at you, Sera? She shook her head. I see a woman who survived things that would have broken most wolves. I see someone who faced humiliation with dignity, who endured years of cruelty and came out of it still capable of kindness. I see my mate, my equal, my queen. His hand found hers, fingers lacing together. Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together. And I promise you, I will never let you fall. Sera turned to look at him, finding his amber eyes glowing softly in the moonlight. The mate bond hummed between them, stronger than ever, pulling her toward him with a force she was tired of resisting. Kieran, she whispered. I'm falling for you. And it scares me. Why? Because you're the man who killed my parents. Because everyone says this is wrong. Because I don't know if I can trust my own feelings or if it's just the mate bond making me feel this way. Kieran was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, the mate bond doesn't create feelings, Sera. It amplifies what's already there. What you feel for me, what I feel for you, it's real. As real as the ground beneath our feet. How can you be so sure? Because I know what it's like to live without it, Kieran said. I've lived for over 300 years. Sera's eyes widened. 300? A small smile tugged at his lips. I'm older than I look. Alphas age slowly. But in all those years, I never felt what I feel for you. Never wanted to protect someone so fiercely. Never ached to be near someone the way I ache to be near you. His honesty took her breath away. I don't know how to be a queen, she confessed. Then we'll figure it out together. One day at a time. Kieran's free hand came up to cup her face. I need you to understand something, Sera. Whatever we face tomorrow, whatever challenges come, I choose you. Not because the bond tells me to. But because in the short time I've known you, you've shown me a strength and grace that humbles me. Sera felt tears pricking at her eyes. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever made her feel valued, wanted, cherished. "I choose you too," she whispered. "I'm still scared, but I choose you." Kieran's eyes flashed amber, his wolf rising to the surface. "May I kiss you?" Instead of answering, Sera rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The mate bond exploded between them, a rush of sensation so intense it made her gasp. Kieran's arms wrapped around her, pulling her close as he deepened the kiss. His mouth moved over hers with a hunger barely held in check, and Sera felt answering need flare through her body. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kieran rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since the moment I saw you," he admitted. "Then why didn't you?" "Because I wanted you to want it too. Not because the bond demanded it, but because you chose it." And that, more than anything else, made Sera's heart melt completely. They stayed on the balcony for hours, talking and kissing and simply being together. By the time Sera finally returned to her own room, the sun was beginning to rise. She fell asleep with a smile on her face and the warm certainty of Kieran's presence through the bond. Tomorrow, she would face the pack leaders. Tomorrow, she would step into her role as queen. But tonight, she was just a woman who had found her mate. And that was enough. The reception hall was magnificent, a grand space with soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers that cast rainbow light across the polished marble floors. Sera stood at the entrance in her formal gown, a stunning creation of midnight blue silk that seemed to shimmer with starlight, and tried not to hyperventilate. Inside, over 200 wolves waited. Pack leaders and their mates, powerful alphas and betas, all gathered to judge whether she was worthy to be their queen. "Ready?" Kieran asked, offering his arm. He looked devastating in his formal black attire, every inch the powerful king. "No," Sera admitted. "But let's do this anyway." They entered together, and conversation died as every eye turned to them. Sera could feel the weight of their stares, the assessment, the skepticism. Then Kieran's voice rang out, amplified by magic so everyone could hear. "Pack leaders of the kingdom, I present to you Queen Sera Blackthorn, my mate and your sovereign lady." The title, Blackthorn, not Ashwood, sent a murmur through the crowd. Sera forced herself to stand tall, to meet the eyes of those watching her, even as her heart raced. The reception proceeded according to protocol. Pack leaders came forward one by one to formally greet her. Some were kind, their congratulations genuine. Others were cold, their distrust obvious. And then Alpha Garrett stepped forward. "Your Majesty," he said, his bow just deep enough to be respectful, but shallow enough to be an insult. "How unexpected to see you here." "I'm the queen," Sera replied, keeping her voice level. "Where else would I be?" "Indeed. Though I wonder how long that will last, once the truth comes out." Kieran's hand tightened on her arm, but before he could speak, Sera stepped forward. "You claim to have evidence that questions my legitimacy," she said, her voice carrying across the silent hall. "Why don't you share it now? Let everyone hear these accusations you're so eager to spread." Garrett's eyes gleamed with malicious pleasure. "As you wish, Your Majesty." He pulled out the folder of documents and began reading from them. Records that suggested Sera had been older during the rebellion. Testimony from wolves who claimed to have seen her at rebel meetings. Intelligence reports that painted her as a willing participant in her parents' plot. With each revelation, the murmurs grew louder. Sera could feel the tide of opinion turning against her, could see doubt and suspicion spreading through the crowd. When Garrett finished, silence fell. Every eye was on Sera, waiting for her response. "I was 5 years old," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "The documents are wrong. But even if they weren't, even if I had been 8 or 10, I would still have been a child. And children are not responsible for their parents' crimes." "Pretty words," Garrett sneered. "But how can we trust you? How do we know you're not still loyal to the rebellion? That you're not using your position as queen to continue your parents' work?" Sera felt something inside her snap. All the years of being blamed for things she didn't do, all the judgment and suspicion, it crystallized into cold fury. "You want to know if you can trust me?" she said, her voice ringing through the hall. Then judge me by my actions, not my bloodline. I have lived my entire life paying for my parents' sins. I have endured isolation, cruelty, and constant suspicion. And yet I survived. I maintained my humanity, my compassion, my honor. She turned to address the entire assembly. I didn't choose to be born in Ashwood. I didn't choose the mate bond that made me queen. But I am choosing, here and now, to serve this kingdom with everything I have. To protect the wolves of this land, to stand beside your king, to be the queen you deserve. Power thrummed through her words, and she realized with shock that her wolf, her weak, barely there wolf, was rising to the surface, lending strength to her voice. If you want to challenge my right to be here, then challenge it, she continued. But do it honestly. Don't hide behind forged documents and rumors. Face me directly and see if I'm the threat you claim I am. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, from the back of the hall, someone began to clap. Slowly, others joined in, until the entire assembly was applauding. Not everyone, Garrett and his allies stood silent and furious, but enough. Enough to matter. Kieran pulled her close, his pride and love flowing through the bond so strongly it made her breath catch. My magnificent queen, he murmured against her ear. But even as Sera acknowledged the applause, she saw Garrett's expression. This wasn't over. Whatever game he was playing, she'd only won the first round. The real battle was yet to come. Chapter 6. Uncovered Truths. After the reception, Luna pulled Sera aside into a private study. Her expression was serious, troubled in a way Sera had never seen before. What is it? Sera asked, alarm bells ringing in her head. Luna laid out the documents Garrett had presented, spreading them across the desk. I've been analyzing these all week. They're real, Sera. Not forgeries. Sera's stomach dropped. But that would mean... It means someone in the intelligence service 18 years ago filed reports suggesting you were older than 5. That you might have been involved. Luna's amber eyes met hers. The question is why. Maybe they were right, Sera whispered. Maybe I don't remember because... No. The voice came from the doorway. Kieran stood there, his expression grim. I've been doing my own investigation. And I found something interesting. He crossed to the desk and pulled out another document. This one yellowed with age and sealed with a wax stamp Sera didn't recognize. This is the original birth record, Kieran said. Filed when you were born. According to this, you were born on March 15, 2001. Which would make you 5 years old when your parents were executed in 2006, exactly as you've always believed. Then where did the other records come from? Luna asked. That's what I wanted to know. Kieran's jaw clenched. So I dug deeper. And I found that all of the documents suggesting Sera was older were filed by the same intelligence officer. A wolf named Marcus Thornhill. The name hit Sera like a physical blow. Alpha Marcus? But he was just a beta back then. He didn't become Alpha of Crescent Moon Pack until 6 months after your parents were executed, Kieran finished. When the previous Alpha died under mysterious circumstances. Sera's mind raced. You think Marcus falsified those records? But why? That's what we need to find out. Luna was already moving toward the door. I'll have him brought to the palace for questioning. Wait, Sera said. If you summon him officially, he'll know we're onto him. He'll have time to prepare, to destroy evidence. Kieran looked at her with surprise and approval. What do you suggest? I go to him, Sera said, the plan forming even as she spoke. I'm the weak Omega he tormented for years. He won't see me as a threat. If I can get him talking. Absolutely not, Kieran said immediately. It's too dangerous. I'll have guards with me, Sera countered. Hidden, but there. And you can monitor everything through the mate bond. If anything goes wrong, you'll know immediately. Kieran clearly didn't like it, but after a long moment, he nodded. All right. But I'm coming too. I'll stay out of sight, but I'm not letting you face him alone. 2 days later, Sera found herself standing outside the Crescent Moon Pack house for the first time since the marking ceremony. The building looked exactly as she remembered, large and imposing, but in a way that spoke more of function than elegance. Nothing like the palace. Alpha Marcus was waiting for her in his office, his expression an odd mixture of obsequious respect and barely concealed contempt. The mate bond hummed with Kieran's presence nearby, a constant reassurance that she wasn't truly alone. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, the title dripping with sarcasm. "To what do I owe this unexpected visit?" Sera forced herself to sit in the chair across from his desk, to appear calm and confident even though being in this room made her skin crawl with bad memories. "I wanted to talk to you about my parents," she said. Marcus's eyebrows rose. "Your parents? After all these years?" "I'm the queen now," Sera said. "I need to know the truth about what happened." "You were there, weren't you? During the investigation?" "I was a beta then, assisting the previous Alpha," Marcus said carefully. "What specifically do you want to know?" "The records say I might have been older than 5 when they were executed. That I might have been involved in the rebellion." Sera watched his face carefully. "Is that true?" Something flickered across Marcus's expression. Too quick for her to identify. The investigation was complicated. There were many conflicting reports. "You filed some of those reports," Sera pressed. "Reports that suggested I was complicit." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Who told you that?" "It doesn't matter. What matters is the truth." Sera leaned forward. "Were those reports accurate, Marcus? Or did you have another reason for filing them?" For a long moment, Marcus was silent. Then he laughed. A harsh, bitter sound that made Sera's skin crawl. "You really don't remember, do you?" he said. "All these years, and you genuinely have no idea." "No idea about what?" Marcus stood, moving to the window. "Your parents weren't planning to assassinate the Alpha King, Sera. They were planning to overthrow the entire pack system. To create a new order where bloodlines and rank didn't matter, where even an Omega could rise to power." Sera's breath caught. That's not what they were convicted of. "Because that's not what the kingdom needed to hear," Marcus said. The official story was simpler, cleaner. A straightforward assassination plot was something wolves could understand and condemn. But the truth? The truth was far more dangerous. He turned to face her, and Sera saw something almost like pity in his eyes. "You were going to be their proof of concept, Sera. The Omega child they would raise to lead. They were training you, even at 5 years old, to believe you could be more than your rank. And you couldn't allow that," Sera said quietly, pieces clicking into place. "Because if an Omega could lead, it would undermine everything the pack hierarchy was built on." "I did what was necessary to protect our way of life," Marcus said. "I falsified those intelligence reports to ensure you would be discredited, that no one would ever look at you and see a potential leader. I convinced the Alpha to take you in but treat you as the lowest of the low, to break that revolutionary spirit your parents had instilled in you." "You destroyed my life," Sera whispered. "You made me believe I was worthless, that I was a burden. I saved the kingdom." Marcus's voice rose. "If your parents' ideology had spread, it would have torn apart the very fabric of our society. Wolves need hierarchy, need structure. Without it, we're no better than rogues." "So you admit it," a new voice said. Marcus spun around to find Kieran standing in the doorway, flanked by royal guards. His eyes were pure amber, his wolf very close to the surface. "Your Majesty," Marcus stammered. "I can explain." "You falsified intelligence reports," Kieran said, his voice deadly quiet. "You manipulated the investigation into the Ashwood rebellion. You deliberately tormented an innocent child for 18 years to serve your own political agenda." "I was protecting the kingdom." "You were protecting your own prejudices," Kieran corrected. "And in doing so, you committed treason against the crown." "Guards, arrest him." As the guards moved forward, Marcus's expression twisted with rage. "You're making a mistake. She's dangerous, just like her parents. One day she'll show her true colors, and when she does, the whole kingdom will suffer." But Sera barely heard him. She was too busy processing what she'd learned, too busy trying to reconcile the reality of her parents with the version she'd believed all these years. Kieran was beside her in an instant, his hand warm on her shoulder. "Are you all right?" "I don't know," Sera admitted. "Everything I thought I knew. We'll sort through it together," Kieran promised. "But right now let's get you home." Home. The palace. With Kieran. Yes, Sera thought. That was home now. That night, Sera stood in Kieran's room for the first time. He'd invited her in after dinner, and she'd said yes without hesitation. "My parents weren't trying to kill you," she said, staring out at the moonlit gardens. "They were trying to change the world." "They were," Kieran agreed. He stood beside her, close but not touching. "For what it's worth, I respected that, even as I executed them." Sera turned to look at him. "How can you say that?" "Because I understood what they wanted, even if I disagreed with their methods." Kieran's expression was somber. "They saw the flaws in our system, the way rank and bloodline determined everything. They weren't wrong about that. But the change they wanted couldn't come through violence and chaos. It had to come slowly, carefully." "Is that what you've been doing?" Sera asked. "Changing the system?" "Trying to," Kieran said. "It's why I established the council with representatives from different ranks, why I've been working to create more opportunities for wolves regardless of their bloodline. But it's slow work. Too slow sometimes." Sera thought about this, about her parents' dream and Kieran's reality. "They would have liked you," she said finally, "if they could have seen what you're trying to build. And I think they would be very proud of you," Kieran replied. "Their daughter, proving that an Omega can be a queen." The words broke something open in Sera's chest. She turned to Kieran, reaching up to cup his face. "Make love to me," she whispered. Kieran's eyes flashed amber. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Sera said. "I choose you, Kieran. All of you. I'm ready." What followed was tender and passionate and perfect. Kieran was gentle but thorough, bringing her to heights of pleasure she'd never imagined. And when they finally joined completely, the mate bond snapped into its final form. A connection so profound that Sera could feel Kieran's heartbeat as clearly as her own. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Sera's head on Kieran's chest, his arms wrapped protectively around her. "I love you," Kieran murmured into her hair. "I should have said it before, but I was afraid." "I love you too," Sera interrupted. "And I'm not afraid anymore." Because she'd finally understood the truth, she wasn't defined by her parents' legacy or by the rank she'd been born into. She was defined by her choices, by the strength she'd found in surviving, by the love she'd discovered with her mate. She was Queen Sera Blackthorn. And she was exactly where she was meant to be. 1 year later, the Grand Hall was filled to capacity. Every pack leader in the kingdom gathered for the annual summit. But this year's summit was different. This year, for the first time in the kingdom's history, they would be voting on a proposal to reform the rank system, to create opportunities for wolves of all ranks to rise based on merit rather than bloodline. Sera stood beside Kieran on the raised platform, her hand in his, as Luna presented the proposal they'd spent months crafting. The debate was fierce, with traditionalists arguing against change and progressives pushing for even more radical reforms. But in the end, when the vote was called, the proposal passed. It wasn't everything Sera's parents had dreamed of, but it was a start. That night, as she and Kieran stood on their balcony watching the moon rise over the gardens, Sera felt a peace she'd never known before. "Your parents would be proud," Kieran said softly. "So would yours," Sera replied. They stood in comfortable silence, the mate bond humming contentedly between them. Through that bond, Sera could feel something new, a tiny spark of life growing within her. Their child. The next generation. A symbol of everything they'd built together. She smiled and rested her hand on her still flat stomach. "Kieran? We're going to need a nursery." The joy that flooded through the bond was almost overwhelming. Kieran swept her into his arms, spinning her around as he laughed with pure delight. "A nursery," he agreed. "And everything else. Whatever you need, my queen. My love. My mate." Sera kissed him, pouring all her love and happiness into the gesture. She had come to the marking ceremony expecting humiliation. She had found a kingdom, a purpose, and a love that would last forever. And that was the greatest destiny anyone could ask for. The end.